Hello, Dog Nation. My name is Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Hope you had a great weekend. I know I certainly did. Got off to a great start on Friday. We'll talk more about this, but our DawgNation Days of Summer event could not have been more fun, and all the folks who came out certainly made it be that way. We're looking forward to doing a lot more of that kind of stuff here again in the future as you kind of look around, you see the world getting back to normal. What a great thing that is, and thank you so much to all of you who are a part of that here for us this weekend. As I said before, we'll talk more about that during the show. Big show for us today. It's John Stinchcomb later on. I'm going to make a point about the Georgia-Auburn game today that I think is maybe needs to be said, kind of interesting based on some of the other stuff that's out there. We'll do that. Also, we'll begin the show with some words of wisdom from one of the great Georgia Bulldogs in recent memory as it pertains to what this time of the year, this part of the college football calendar means for Georgia's pursuit of a championship. That is all on the way next. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I cannot even begin to tell you how much fun it was on Friday. DawgNation Days of Summer at the Battery Atlanta, Truist Park. We watched the Braves score 20 runs against the Pittsburgh Pirates. How about that? A lot of the folks were there saying that, hey, maybe the same group needs to get together for Georgia football here later on this fall. We can maybe see the same kind of offensive explosion for the Georgia Bulldogs, and that'd be a nice thing to see. But beyond just the results of the game, seeing the Braves get a win over the Pirates, just the entire experience, the time to talk Georgia football, the chance to be outside and enjoy the beautiful weather, of course, great food, some beverages being consumed. The whole thing was just such a great time, and I was so glad to be a part of it. You know, so much of this so different than what life was like, say, a year ago. So just a really, really great thing all the way around, and a great thing to just to be able to share that moment with DawgNation once again. So for those of you who were part of DawgNation Days of Summer, thank you so much for the Atlanta Braves, whose hospitality was really just unrivaled in how they treated us throughout the entire thing. Big thanks to all of you there as well. Just a really, really great time. So now that I've said that, we'll talk more about the Braves before we're done on the show today. I've got a brief reminder about some fun stuff upcoming for the Braves. We'll get to that here in a little bit. But let me begin today's show by saying this, that for the mainstream college football fan, and to be honest with you, most of the people who consume this content are not really in the mainstream. You're probably a college football obsessive. I certainly am a college football obsessive. We talk about this subject each and every day. Our minds, our brains just work a little differently than the average sports fan does. For the average sports fan who kind of likes all sports and, is just kind of following whatever's in the news, the college football season itself kind of never feels more far away than it does right now. If you think about this in your brain, we are almost 6 months removed from Georgia's last game, and we are many, many months removed from, like Georgia's next game. We're kind of in that time of year where it seems like a long time since Georgia's played a game, and it feels like it's going to be a long time still until Georgia plays its next game. We're starting to get a little closer to that, but we're kind of in that kind of moment which it just sort of feels like we're kind of in the gaps on all of that. So, and you can look around this weekend and see, plenty of examples of that. I mean, I think just about every conversation I had, other than my daughter's birthday, which also took her birthday party, which took place this weekend, just about every other conversation I had, apart from that, was all about golf, right? I mean, I was obsessed over the PGA Championship this weekend. I'm a big Phil Mickelson fan. I was so happy to see him win, and so many of the people that I ran into, talked to, kind of into that golf, what's going on there. There's obviously a big, push for the Atlanta Braves this weekend, who kind of got the bats going against the Pittsburgh Pirates. People paying attention to that. Here in the Atlanta area, people were excited about Trae Young hitting the game-winning shot against the New York Knicks last night, and that's just kind of what all the conversation is. And it seems like right now, because there's so much going on with so many of the other sports, that college football couldn't be less top of mind than it kind of is right now. But those of you that pay very close attention to this stuff, those of you that like to follow college football as closely as I do, you know that sometimes when college football is at the quietest, it's most quiet, or however you can say that, whatever the proper grammar is for that, sometimes when it seems like the scene around college football is quiet, that's actually when the important work for the upcoming season is going on. It's what you do when nobody's looking that probably matters more than anything else. And we all kind of intuitively understand that it's the willingness to embrace that grind, the willingness to kind of go out there and work hard each and every day that probably matters more so than anything else. Now, there has been some attention paid to some of this. You probably read the story last week. Mike Griffith, DawgNation.com, writing about Georgia quarterback JT Daniels, who obviously hails from California, and some of the other Georgia Bulldogs who have California ties all being out there, some other Georgia players joining them, getting together way out there in the Golden State for some off-season workouts. So there is a little bit of publicity paid to some of the stuff that's going on here. In fact, last week on the show, Mike Griffith kind of talked about in his mind what is important about those summer workouts that are going on right now. While everybody else is paying attention to all the other sports, college football getting ready for its upcoming season, Mike, when he joined us last week, talked about what's happening out there in California. This is what Mike had to say.
It used to be that was the norm, but now everybody's, got their own handheld entertainment system, their own social media network, and teams aren't as close as they once were, right? I mean, it's a different world. I mean, it's a different society. Being close to somebody now, putting on a headset and playing a video game with them 2,500 miles away. It's just that's how things are, and frankly, because of their schedules, there's not a whole lot of time for that sort of thing when you look at what a student athlete has to do now.
Yeah, so I think Mike brings up a good point about that. And we even talked about this a little bit last week that, when you have a bunch of players, and it's been reported obviously by Mike that, they're traveling out there, that sometimes it's not just the workout they're doing that matters, but it's also the time they spend together. You form a bond with somebody when you're traveling with them. It's one of the reasons why families like taking vacations together, because you come back on the other side of it, at least you hope so, kind of stronger as a family. Couples understand that. When you take a trip away, you just kind of come back with kind of a little bit of a freshness about the relationship sometimes. And I think for football players, it can be the same thing too. When you're out there in California, when you're enjoying some summertime together, you kind of develop that bond with each other in addition to the work that you're doing. But while the situation with the Georgia players out in California is kind of a high-profile example of the off-season workouts that go on, the truth is much of the other stuff that's actually maybe more important is probably less heralded, right? It's not the high-profile, glamorous, luxurious trip to California where you work out with your quarterback and his, probably pretty expensive personal coach who, is a little bit famous in his own right, in Jordan Palmer. It's the just showing up at the weight room every single day. It's the just showing up for whatever other kind of off-season conditioning work you're trying to do. And, sometimes you're doing that for the gram, but sometimes you're actually doing that in real life to actually improve your physical conditioning, improve your strength. And you're showing up doing that thanklessly day in, day out. And someone like me who's in the media, someone like you who's a fan, we don't notice any of that kind of stuff. But you better believe the results will be put on display this fall, seeing who really has improved year over year, who really has changed their body, changed their mindset, improved their skill set, and who really is ready to make a bigger contribution in 2021 than they were in 2020 on the basis of what they've done right here during this time of year. I'll tell you something else that makes me think about that. There's a very good TV show that comes on. I think it's Saturday mornings. It's WSB Game Day. Our friends over Channel 2 do this, and it's good coverage from UGA, and a part of that TV show is the former Georgia quarterback, the SEC champion from 2005, DJ Shockley. And so Shockley was on the most recent edition of WSB Game Day, and I'll put a link to this when I post the show at DawgNation.com because I want you to hear the full thing. You should seek it out and find it for yourself, but I'll put a link to at the very least to what DJ Shockley had to say. You can check that out. Shockley himself, on the most recent edition of that program, did talk a little bit about what I just said, that, what you do right now when coaches are, sort of barred by NCAA rule from being with you. They can't have that contact with you. So what people are willing to do on their own, the degree to which they're willing to be a self-starter in all of this, is kind of the missing, ingredient that can determine championship success or not. You can take my word on that. Obviously, Shockley speaks with a lot of gravitas in his words, and he kind of echoed a similar sentiment. Take a listen to DJ Shockley here.
Well, I think the number one thing is establishing who are the new leaders, because you got a bunch of guys in new roles. And then also you got to have guys who come in and see, can they be better from one year to the next? Who's going to take the next step? Who's going to come in and watch more film? Who's going to be guys you're going to see in the building all the time trying to perfect their craft? Who's going to go out on the field and do the extra work that their coach never even asked them to do? These are the times where coaches find out probably the most about their players when they're not supervised, when they're not in structured environments to go out and say, I need you to go out and work on this. Which guys are going to come out and be the leaders to get everybody together, first off, and then who's going to be the guys who want to be better without that coach instruction assistance or that coach right behind them telling them, we need you to go lift weights, we need you to go run. Which guys are going to go out and put the extra effort in to see how you get better, especially in the summertime?
I think it's great stuff from DJ Shockley, once again from WSB Game Day. I'll put a link to that when I post the show at DawgNation.com later on today. And Shockley's words would matter no matter what, but they seem particularly valuable for Georgia here during this offseason because of so much of what we've talked about recently, that Georgia, if it wants to be a national championship team, needs to take some of the talented players on its roster right now and turn them into more top-end level performers. We've cited many times that recent national champions have about a half dozen first-round picks. Georgia has plenty of potential first-round picks in its roster, but it's not obvious right now that anyone is a surefire first-round pick. Plenty of guys who could be, few guys who might be, but no one's a given or a guarantee right now. But the work that gets done during this offseason could certainly change that. The same thing going back to Friday's show. We talked about the number of kind of first-team All-SEC performers that you need. Bama had 9 a year ago. LSU, the national champion from 2019, had 6 first-team All-SEC guys going back to 2019. Georgia had a couple on the first-team list that at least Athlon released the other day, which is kind of a talking point in all of this. But you need more of those kind of top-end performers to emerge over the course of the season if you want to be on that national championship level. Once again, the work that's done this summer to change your body, to improve your mindset, to develop your skill set, that's the kind of way those big leaps forward can be taken. I think what Shockley says there is incredibly true and incredibly valuable. We won't see most of this going on. This happens away from the watchful eye of fans and media and everybody else. But the results this field on the fall will bear fruit or not. And my guess is these Georgia players right now really are working as hard as they can because they want to make 2021 as good as it possibly can be. And I think you would join me in saying I can't wait to see the results on all of that. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, and glad to have you with us no matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, from the radio at noon, on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, and we are available as a podcast wherever you find them on all the podcast platforms, including, as I said a moment ago, posting the show each and every day on the world-famous DawgNation.com. By the way, it's always great to visit the show post at DawgNation.com if you want to drop some comments in there to be a part of our R.S. Andrews podcast cool down that happens at the end of every show. On video, we take those comments on Facebook and YouTube, but on the podcast, we take those comments after the fact from those who listen to it and then go to DawgNation.com or hit me up on Twitter at DawgNation Daily. Just a fun thing to be able to do at the end of each and every show. And, of course, today's show would not be possible, as I said before, without our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia. They can help equip your house with energy-efficient windows and doors. That's a good thing this time of year. It's hot outside. You want to keep that where it's supposed to be, and you want it cool on the inside. And once again, you don't want that energy, that cool air escaping out, and that's what better windows and doors can do. They can also improve the curb appeal of your home. I know so many of you are thinking about real estate right now. Obviously, home values skyrocketing. You can, in many cases, improve your own home value by better curb appeal. That's what better windows and doors can do for you, like the ones you get from Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Also, great savings right now as well. You can currently get 10% off your entire project or 0% APR for 24 months. It's a easy, conversation, that initial consultation that they'll talk you through all your installation options and, just the ways in which you can kind of get this done. It's just a really, really no pressure situation. Just a great chance for you to be educated on everything that Pella Window and Door of Georgia can do for you. So a couple different ways to get in touch. 678-638-1496. That's the phone number. Once again, 678-638-1496. Or give them a call. Website, PellaofGA.com/DawgNation. That's PellaofGA.com/DawgNation. Pella Window and Door of Georgia is viewed to be the best. All right, we're going to get John Stinchcomb here coming up in just a moment. Before that, though, I want to go around the doghouse, assisted today by our friends at AAA. And I want to talk about, kind of the perspective as a fan that I have on one of the games upcoming for Georgia here this year. And listen, I think because I am a fan, I sort of understand the mindset that fans sort of bring to the table. And sometimes that we as fans have a tendency to get just a little bit greedy. And this is an example, I think, probably of that for me this year. I'm looking at a game against Auburn for Georgia, road trip to Jordan-Hare Stadium. And I sort of find myself thinking, man, it'd be kind of nice. I don't just want Georgia to win this game. I want Georgia to win this game going away. I want this to be more than just a nice, comfortable, easy win. I kind of want to see Georgia kind of smack Auburn around a little bit. Now, most of you don't really need a reason to want to do that. Most of you don't really like Auburn. In fact, one of the things that I always get a little bit of pushback on when I kind of tout Georgia's biggest rival as being Florida, and we do believe that. Around here, we believe that a good Georgia fan is a Gator hater first and foremost. Many of you respond back to that with, BA, I get where you're coming from, but man, I really hate Auburn. And I totally understand that Auburn's a fairly easy team to hate in most years. However, my reason for wanting to see Georgia slap Auburn around this upcoming season goes beyond just the fact that Auburn is a rival that most of you enjoy seeing Georgia slap around. There's actually a practical value in all of this. And I'll tell you what made me think about this. This morning I was listening to the radio station WJOX. It's out of Birmingham, Alabama, and every Monday, Paul Feinbaum makes an appearance on their morning show. Feinbaum, his full show airs there on WJOX, so he does a little morning show hit on Monday mornings. And the hosts of the program asked Feinbaum about Auburn for this upcoming year. And in talking about Auburn for the upcoming year, Feinbaum made a reference to Georgia. And in listening to Paul talk about Georgia and Auburn here, it became very easy for me to see what Auburn is going to try to rally around this year, what their talking point is going to kind of be. And so I think as a Georgia fan, you kind of hope that Georgia can anticipate this coming, sort of head it off at the bend, and quiet it before it even has a chance to get going. Let me let you listen to Feinbaum talking about Auburn and see if you notice what I noticed. This is Feinbaum from this morning, WJOX in Birmingham.
I don't think the win total right now is the most critical thing for Harsin. I think it's for him to be able to show that he can compete with Kirby Smart and Nick Saban in recruiting. And I'm not saying, beating them. Those are the two best recruiters in the SEC and arguably in the country. He just has to show that outside of that stray five-star who decides to go to Auburn for family reasons or other reasons, that he can legitimately be a powerhouse, because you have to at Auburn. I think he's saying all the right things. You've heard me talk in the past about my admiration for him, but that's what it's going to be about. Can he recruit with the big dogs?
So you listen to Feinbaum there, and I'm not saying Feinbaum's taking a pro-Auburn slant on this. I'm just saying that in listening to him talk about this, it becomes very easy to imagine where all this is going for Auburn. It would be unlikely that Auburn beats either Alabama or Georgia for a moment, but let's focus on the Georgia-Auburn game here. Early October-ish type date for this game. Auburn can't beat Georgia, but what if they play them close? All of a sudden now the Auburn fans can kind of talk themselves into Brian Harsin, their first-year coach, and say, man, give Brian Harsin a couple of years to get some players in here and imagine how good this team's going to be. We played Georgia relatively close this year. Auburn's never been afraid to kind of claim a moral victory when they thought they had a chance to do that. You sort of get the idea that there's the winds kind of starting to blow for the idea of Auburn claiming some moral victories here this year. So if you're a Georgia fan and you don't even want that stuff to get off the ground, you don't even want the Brian Harsin era to kind of get a step forward going here, you want to stop that before it starts. So before any Auburn fan has any chance to say, we may have lost this game by 10 points or 17 points or whatever it is, but man, Brian Harsin's a coach. He's closing the gap. Imagine how good this team's going to be in a couple of years. You kind of get where I'm going on all of that. You sort of get the sense that's what Auburn may try to sell against Georgia or their other big rival, Alabama, or anything else. So for me personally, on the basis of what Paul Feinbaum says there on WJOX this morning, sort of hoping that doesn't happen. I'm sort of hoping that Georgia can kind of smack Auburn around a little bit to kind of keep any of that talk from getting started, because you sort of get the impression that's what Auburn's going to try to do. It is Around the Doghouse. It is assisted today by our friends at AAA, and something else you can kind of anticipate here. My friends at AAA are going to take good care of. You already know that when it comes to legendary roadside assistance, and as you're starting to travel around this summer, you're thinking a lot about that, of course. But let me get you thinking about some other things when it comes to AAA. How about auto insurance? Did you know that when you switch and save with AAA, you can save on average $529? That's a big, big deal. That's a lot of extra money in your pocket at a time in which extra money really matters. So keep this website in mind and check it out and find out just how true this really is. It's AAA.com. That's AAA. AAA.com/auto insurance. Switch and save with AAA today, and I truly believe that you'll be glad that you did. All right, it's great to have you with us here today. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Before we're done, we'll give some shout-outs to some other UGA athletics teams who have some big stuff going on here this spring. We're trying to keep up with all the spring stuff that is going on over the next few days. I'm looking forward to that. We'll do a shout-out on that before we're done. Oh, there's also some very interesting transfer news. What else is new out of the SEC? We will touch on that before we're done on today's program there as well. But for now, on everything happening around the UGA program. Great voice to start a Monday with. How about our buddy John Stinchcomb, the former UGA All-American, here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Always great to have John Stinchcomb here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. A lot to do with him as we kind of look at everything that's been going on around UGA. But, John, let me bring you in on where I just was. Kind of interesting, and when you look at the Georgia schedule this upcoming year, you do see Brian Harsin, first-year coach at Auburn, but you also see Shane Beamer, first-year coach at South Carolina, and Josh Heupel, first-year coach at Tennessee. I'll count Clark Lee in this Vanderbilt, although I don't know that too many people think one thing about him, much one way or the other. But a lot of these first-year coaches are going to be trying to do something to distinguish themselves and set them apart from the other first-year guys or the kind of huge crop of second-year coaches that we also have in the SEC there as well. And, on the one hand, I think a lot of these teams would love to play Georgia close as a way of kind of getting a moral victory here. But on the other hand, for a Georgia team that's so hungry for a national championship and, so desperate to be a part of the playoff picture, once you get past Clemson in week one, another example of this being a pretty manageable schedule for Georgia is that large number of first-year coaches that Georgia's set to play after that. Wouldn't you agree?
I wonder if this is how other teams that play in weaker conferences feel.
Yeah.
Because when you start the year and you look at the calendar and you go, man, it's setting up for a lot of success. I mean, obviously that Clemson game looms large out of week one, but you look at the season and how it plays out and the opportunities that are presenting themselves, and you have to be excited as a Georgia fan. I mean, there's a number of programs that usually you can count on to give you a really strong contest, and I'm sure there's some programs that will surprise you as the season plays out. But on paper, this time of year, the old adage from every Georgia fan of this is our year, there's a lot of reasons for folks to get excited about what this 2021 season could hold for our Dogs.
Yeah, completely agree with that. And listen, it is, as you mentioned a moment ago, it is highly possible that one of the other 11 games in the Georgia schedule, obviously not counting the Clemson game because I think we know how tough that is, it is highly possible that one of those teams ends up being way better than we kind of anticipate on paper. We all understand that, and at least one of those teams will probably be somewhat better than we kind of think they are right now. That's just kind of the nature of football. There's always some room for surprises when it comes to a lot of this kind of stuff. But, John, you and I both have probably, whether it's sitting here having this conversation or just separately looking at, other Georgia schedules in previous years, there are a lot of schedules that on paper have looked much more daunting than what Georgia is slated to play right now. Over the years, there have been very many years in which the schedule on paper seemed way tougher than the one that's going to seem for this upcoming year.
And at the end of the year, that mattered. I mean, some of the best Georgia teams, their record probably didn't reflect that as well, just because of the amount of competition they saw. And you look at the end of the year record, and that's how a team is judged as to their quality. But I can think back, and at least over this past decade, where some of our best teams probably didn't. It wasn't as reflective as their talent probably possessed when you look at their record, just because of the amount of competition and the quality contests that they found themselves in week and week out. And this season, like you say, there's going to be surprises. There always is. There's going to be a team that's unexpected, that they're performing better and they're motivated, and there's some synergy that they've created, and it's going to be a battle that Georgia finds themselves in that was probably unexpected, certainly this time of year when you're just looking at what it could be. But what a great opportunity. I mean, I think that's why there's so much optimism for Georgia and this team, is because, one, the amount of talent we have in-house,
but the way the schedule is set up and the lack of established one, rosters, but two, programs. I mean, the number of first and second year coaches, the amount of turnover, the quality players that teams have lost. There's just an ample amount of opportunity that presents itself for a Georgia team that's bringing back a lot of their key pieces that are arrow-up players, and it's obviously an arrow-up program from a very high starting point.
I played a little bit of audio before you joined us from former Georgia quarterback DJ Shockley on WSB TV talking about the value of off-season workouts and what's happening during the summer. And John, as you well know, being a former player yourself, this is the time of year in which we kind of seem like we're far removed from the previous season and, you know, still a ways away from the upcoming season. And in some cases, whether it's, you know, watching Phil this weekend or watching Braves or watching Hawks, it sort of seems like there's, you know, probably less top-of-mind college football awareness for the mainstream kind of average sports fan right now. But it's that quiet work that's done away from the watchful eye that may go towards winning a national championship as much as anything that can be done. So give us a little insight, if you don't mind, about, you know, what does happen this summer, whether it's your position offensive lineman, and I would assume the physical strengthening that's looking to go on, or maybe the skill position guys who are looking to sharpen those skills, or something in between on all of that. What's it like this time of year for a college football player?
Well, that's a great question. I think DJ is a great source because he's a guy that looks at the game at the collegiate level and the NFL level. As much reporting as he does on the Falcons, as much as he does the Bulldogs. And what we're seeing in the NFL is a transition from these mandated off-season programs, and they're peeling it back. And where I think it hurts is the development of players. When you have spring games and you have those practices in the off-season and then a period of time, usually 2+ months, it gives guys that are still developing a chance to move the needle. I mean, you just come out of practicing, you know what you need to work on. Obviously, strength conditioning is going to be a piece of every player's development and program as they get ready for training camp. But there's also opportunities in this, call it 10-week period that allows you to say, golly, what am I going to need to accomplish? What do I need to work on so that I'm prepared for this tough slate of games playing in the SEC if you're a Georgia Bulldog? So obviously it's something that I think it's vital for developmental players to recognize this is an opportunity, and some of the best programs are able to do it. I also think it's an opportunity for position groups to start working together and getting that chemistry, because relationships are always huge and vital. And when you have at high school, they do those 7-on-7 camps, and it's really no different. You get the timing down, you understand a guy's approach, and you start to see the little idiosyncrasies and details of a person's work, and it allows you to work better with one another.
You know, one of the things that we talked about a lot last week was CBS Sports comes out every year with its ranking of the top coaches in college football. They do the Power 5 coaches, and Kirby Smart's 7th on that list. I think he was 6th maybe last year. I think he maybe drops a spot here this year. On the one hand, you know, being 7th out of a list of, you know, however many, you know, Power 5 coaches is certainly nothing to be ashamed of if you're Kirby Smart. And yet, when you look at that list, you know, John, one of the things that kind of comes up there is in my mind, I think there's an argument to make Smart even higher on the list, because, you know, Dan Mullen's a top 10 coach according to CBS. Kirby Smart's beat him in 17, 18, and 19, beat him 3 times as a head coach. Kirby Smart has beaten Lincoln Riley in the 2017 Rose Bowl. That's a guy who's ranked ahead of him. You know, he's beaten Brian Kelly twice. That's a guy that's also ranked ahead of him there as well. He's got a winning record against top 10 coaches. The only blemish are the losses that he's had to Nick Saban, Alabama, which makes Smart in many ways very, you know, no different than much of the rest of college football. I guess my point here, John, is that I think it's completely fair to say, okay, now it's time for Smart to take a big step forward. Now it's time for Smart to kind of take, you know, either return Georgia to college football playoff or get over the hump and win the national championship. We would all agree that that's true. That's just the next thing for UGA. But I think it's also important to properly characterize what has happened for Smart over the course of his, you know, last 5 years on this job, which includes a lot of big wins against guys that outlets like CBS seem to have a lot of respect for. In other words, I think it's important to say what Smart has done while we're also talking about what Smart still needs to do. Would you agree with that?
I would. I think if I'm trying to take an unbiased approach and look at this list, I mean, there's an obvious tier one in Coach Sweeney and Coach Saban. There's your ones and twos right there, and you could easily justify their placement. It's hard to argue there. But you look at this next crop of 5 coaches, I think from the 2020 year to 2021, it was Jimbo Fisher that jumps, really trade spots with Kirby on this list. Now, while we discuss it, I think we can all agree that not one single coach cares where they land on this list, right?
Sure.
But it's fun fodder for us to discuss and the whys behind it, because you look at Coach Day, Coach Kelly, Coach Riley, Coach Fisher, Coach Smart. That's the next crop. That's that tier 2, if you will. And you can make a case for each guy of how they've moved the needle on their program, what they inherited, and what they've done with it. And is it? There's always more excitement for the new guy, the new thing. Same thing happens in recruiting, right? We always care about who's that next 5-star that we're going to sign, and you kind of lose track of the fact that we signed a 5-star 2 years ago, and he's on the roster now, but everybody's excited about, can this guy that is just now leaving high school, can he help us in the fall? Well, same thing when we're looking at these rankings for coaches. Coach Smart in this little tier, he's probably more established than, he's had more time on campus and quite honestly has accomplished more than most of the other coaches that are in the discussion for these next slots, 3 through 7, if you will. So there's always that shiny new toy that everybody gets excited about, and you move them up a little bit. I'm not sure that, this might be the only time that Coach Fisher is considered as shiny and new, as much experience as he's had in college football. But you understand where we're going with this. I think all the other coaches are very respectable in what they've done with their programs and how they've moved the needle for them. But at the end of the day, I think Coach Smart's got one of the best opportunities to really make a significant jump in this ranking, if you will, and he's going to care less about that and more of the why I think the jump can occur, and it's because you're to get to that next level, to be identified in that top 3, it's going to be championships, right? And the consistency in which they come. So I think Georgia is in as good a situation as anybody to make a push, not only in 21, but as a program to really maintain that high level of status.
Well, I'll tell you why this matters to me, and it goes back to something you said at the very beginning of our conversation today, that when you look at Georgia's schedule kind of after Clemson this year, it kind of reminds you of what some other teams around the country seem to play on a yearly basis, and I do think that matters. And what's frustrating is, there is this perception of Brian Kelly, or you mentioned, Ryan Day at Ohio State, and, I'm straining to even think what, Day's even really done as a head coach. It just sort of seems like that there are certain coaches, certain programs that seem to benefit from a lack of proximity to a place like Alabama, where, when you're not forced to measure yourself against an Alabama or, like in 2019, an LSU team that was good enough to topple Alabama, when you're when you're not forced to kind of measure yourself against that, it's really easy to look like you're a great coach, you got a great program, everything else, based on who it is that you're kind of kicking around in each and every week. And listen, I know this kind of comes across as self-serving or, maybe trying to make excuses for why Georgia hasn't gotten over the hump yet. But when you are that team trying to do this in the SEC, I just believe objectively it's true that it is more difficult to do that in this league than it is as Notre Dame, that's mostly been an independent. Ohio State, a lot of the Big Ten not recruiting at the same level they're able to recruit. They have a lot of easy Saturdays. I just believe that's objectively true, John.
Well, I would certainly not argue with you. I mean, you look at the slate of games that Ohio State played this last season. And yes, they played for a national championship, but in a very abbreviated season. And we saw how that final game ended up, and same case that you could make for Notre Dame, not near the level of competition on a consistent basis than what you'd see if you're Georgia on an annual basis. So, yes, I totally agree. And if you're talking about Coach Day, the program that he inherited from Coach Meyer was certainly not dilapidated, and I think a number of coaches would love to walk into that kind of situation where you have national relevance, a pretty well-stocked roster, and then opportunity to continue to build on momentum that pre-exists you taking over at the wheel. So, yeah, I mean, I can certainly understand those arguments. I think if I'm playing devil's advocate here, it's when you see I sent an article this week of the number of players and recruiting classes, and I think Georgia was has the number one overall average recruiting class over the last, 20 years. So the argument for these other places is nobody has done less with more than Georgia has.
Yeah.
And that's a painful realization for any Dog fan, but the only way to silence that kind of critique and criticism is to win the big one. And, I think that's the desire of every Bulldog's heart. So hopefully this is the year for us.
Let me finish on that kind of point, John, because, we talked on the show a lot about taking what is clearly a talented roster filled with obviously good players and taking a few more of those players and kind of move them into that great category. And another example of that last week was, Athlon Sports. That's an organization I kind of like. I love reading the preseason magazines, kind of always have. They've got their preseason All-SEC list out. This is just one of many preseason All-SEC lists that are going to come out, but this one is as good as any of them, I guess. 15 Georgia guys on there. Only a couple of those are like first-team type guys. And what we've said is, hey, you got to take some of those theoretically third and fourth team level SEC players. You got to turn more of those into kind of the first team all SEC type dominator if you want Georgia to be as good as what, the Bamas, the LSUs have been in recent seasons. Would you join me in saying that's kind of, maybe the underlying fundamental that's going to determine, kind of how Georgia is viewed at the end of the season and whether or not they truly are in the playoff and a legitimate national championship contender?
Yes, and I think it's a great place to start for Georgia. One, you're tied for the most players with Alabama on this first, second, and third string SEC teams list that's put together before a single snap has been taken. So the amount of respect that's shown to the roster, I think, is where it needs to be. I agree with the placement of the guys. I mean, I went once I was aware that this might be a subject we're discussing. I look at this list and go, I think this is fair. I think there's opportunities, and let's see where these guys end up at the end of the season. Can N'Kobe Dean and Lewis Seen and Jermaine Burton, Darnell Washington, they're all second, third team guys on this list. So they're on the radar, but it would be hard to justify moving any one of them up higher on this list based on past performance. I think what's going to matter most is how do they maximize on the opportunities that they get this season. I think that's what we've seen as to why they're rated and ranked where they are is because of the potential they possess and the little flashes that we've seen. But what's most important is at the end of the year, where's that first, second, and third team SEC stack up? How have these guys performed? I think right now it's just we're recognizing these are all players that have a very high ceiling and can, at the end of the year, be real factors. So moving that needle, progressing up on the charts, I think is a very realistic potential for second and third team guys to join Jordan Davis and Jamari Salyer as our first team representatives, Jake Camarda And the reason why they're first team is because not only they have great potential, but they've also put together a track record that justifies them being on that first team SEC. And for the rest of that list of Georgia players, and they're not alone, for the other guys in the SEC, it's more about the potential that they possess and what they could do in 2021. So, it's about what they do and how they'll end the year as to what matters most. But I like the fact that Georgia starts with 15 guys on a three-deep all-SEC team, and have the potential to move those guys and possibly add some different names, because I think there's some other guys that might surprise you.
John, I tell you what, it's great to have the conversation with you. Can't wait to see all this happening on the field later on this fall. Hope you continue to enjoy what is, I'm hoping, a great summer for you and your family, and we will look forward to the chance to chat again very soon there as well.
Always enjoy it, B.A. Go Dogs.
Me too.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
By the way, speaking of great summers, they do continue here. And if you're in the Atlanta area where I am, many of you would have liked to have been with us this past Friday for our DawgNation Days of Summer event with the Atlanta Braves. You missed out on that, but there is still plenty of time to take advantage of a great summer coming up here with the Atlanta Braves. School's getting out. Of course, the month of June is going to be huge. A lot of that starts actually Monday prior to June, the big Memorial Day event there. Great Military Appreciation Day. The Washington Nationals in town. And then you got big series throughout the month of June there at Truist Park with the Atlanta Braves, who are suddenly playing much better brand of baseball, at least coming off the weekend there. You got the Boston Red Sox coming into town early June, 4th through the 6th. You've got the LA Dodgers kind of rolling through town there as well. Don't forget the St. Louis Cardinals coming in there as well. They always kind of bring a big crowd with them. Of course, it's Friday night fireworks every Friday. That's another great way to kind of celebrate that summer. Saturdays, the gates actually open early for batting practice. That's always a fun thing to be able to see there as well. Sundays are giveaway days, so big weekends, big teams coming in, Dodgers, Red Sox, Cardinals, and big fun. Boy, Austin Riley swinging the bat great. Obviously, Ronald Acuna continuing to do big things there as well. Braves a fun team to watch. June going to be a great time to watch it there at Truist Park. So please go to Braves.com/tickets for more on that. That's Braves.com/tickets. All right, a lot to get to around the rest of the SEC here, and a lot of it is transfer related. So today is the day, and what is it? It's just before 11 o'clock right now Eastern time. I guess about an hour from right now, former LSU quarterback TJ Finley is slated to make his transfer announcement. He retweeted the other day a reporter saying some schools to keep an eye on in the recruitment of Finley. He mentions Alabama, Auburn, Penn State, and Texas. We have talked about Alabama being more of a factor here than I would have ever assumed. There was some reporting from the Alabama side at 24/7. They'd been involved in Finley. All along, I've sort of assumed that Finley was probably going to Auburn, and I guess that's kind of what I'm assuming right now. Honestly, I'm not that close to it. I haven't really, read all that much about this. I do think it's somewhat interesting because Finley started 5 games for LSU a year ago. So if Auburn were to get him, I mean, just given the uncertainty around, Bo Nix right now, and I realize he's a legacy name, so it's kind of hard to move away from him if you are Auburn. But a first-year coach, it's a little easier for him to do that because he didn't recruit Nix into the program. But, Auburn's in a program that doesn't have much depth beyond beyond Nix, the quarterback spot. They could use that. Maybe the reason why Alabama's involved is because they're also not quite sure what they have from a backup quarterback situation. Maybe, obviously, Bryce Young is the anticipated starter for Alabama. But one way or another, a couple of SEC schools in the mix. Finley slated to announce, and we'll talk tomorrow on the show about whatever it is that he ends up doing. But by the time many of you hear this, he will have already made his announcement. This is, I would say, fairly substantial news around the SEC here today, especially if he chooses Alabama or Auburn. So it looks like Ole Miss has landed on a new offensive line coach. Looks like they're going to hire Jake Thornton, who's most recently at Gardner-Webb, former graduate assistant at Alabama with Nick Saban, if you care about that. This is another example of something I talk about a lot. I'm just not nearly as high on Lane Kiffin as a lot of you are. Certainly the media seems to love him. I think the steak never quite matches the sizzle with Kiffin. His ability to create headlines on the field, nowhere near what his ability to create headlines off the field is. And, this to me is kind of like the lack of stability that you don't see from the truly great coach. This feels a little bit like, Jeremy Pruitt running off his defensive line coach in the middle of the season last year. No one really knows why Clements has gone from from Ole Miss, other than we know that Lane Kiffin asked him to leave the program, and it was, has been reported in Oxford, not because of any kind of off-field behavior, nor is it because of any kind of like NCAA-related thing. At least that's the belief right now. This seems to be, the best that I can tell, just some sort of like conflict in personalities there. So here we are, during the offseason, an upcoming season that's supposed to be a big deal for Ole Miss, and you're kind of running off your offensive line coach. Clements was respected by a lot of folks there in Oxford. Who knows? Maybe this Jake Thornton guy is the next great thing. But, the idea that you're reaching to Gardner Webb to grab an offensive line coach because you ran off the guy you had, this just seems like an unnecessary distraction for Ole Miss, and one of the reasons why I am very skeptical of Lane Kiffin's long-term viability, his likelihood of success in the SEC. This, to me, just seems like an unforced error. But nonetheless, Jake Thornton on his way to being hired there at Ole Miss, according to some reports. I told you last week that when you start looking at upcoming schedules, we did this related to the point spread for the Arkansas-Texas game. I think that's a very interesting upset opportunity for an SEC team. Arkansas gets a chance to host Texas. The Hogs hate Texas. This goes back to the old Southwest Conference days. This is going to be a big deal there in Fayetteville. And I did see where Tom Fornelli, CBS Sports, CBS had this list of all their writers weighing in on the big upset they could see happen. And I saw where Tom Fornelli kind of joins me in saying that, yes, Sam Pittman, a year 2 coach, battling against Steve Sarkisian, a first-year coach there at Texas. Sarkisian's been, of course, a head coach before, but this is his first year at Austin. That this might be one of those games in which the favored Longhorns could be ripe for the picking. By the way, more on Texas coming up in a moment. A very strange story there. But nice to see Tom Fornelli from CBS joining me and saying that Arkansas, indeed, very good chance to pull that upset against Texas. Now, also, we'll have to say here that once too many people start calling for the same thing to happen, just by the unwritten rules of sports, it is now doomed not to happen. So maybe we've reached that territory with Arkansas, Texas. Too many people picking the Hogs there. But listen, I was on Arkansas pretty heavy last year. All right, let's do some transfer stuff here. Jadarius Perkins. We talked about Perkins, you may remember, because Georgia offered Jadarius Perkins. He actually was a junior college defensive back. I think he was like the number 2 junior college DB right below Nugget Warren, who Georgia was obviously in the mix for there for a while. Perkins goes to Missouri. He actually goes through spring practice there and was kind of working as a potential starter at cornerback for Missouri, but then decided he wanted to leave the program. At one point in time, we wondered, because, as I said before, Perkins had put it on there on Twitter that Georgia had offered him, that maybe UGA might be in the mix, but obviously Georgia ends up taking the defensive back out of Alabama, so all of a sudden maybe, Perkins was left to kind of go somewhere else. Well, Perkins has now made his pledge, University of Florida, sharing that on social media, himself there in the orange and blue uniform. So Jadarius Perkins, one-time Missouri defensive back, now going to Florida. So that's actually a pretty big pickup for a Florida team that always seems to use that transfer market. I think that Perkins going there is actually probably a pretty significant move, because this is a guy who's a little older, who's been through some SEC practices, was there at Missouri this spring. I'm not going to downplay this too much. I'm not telling you it changes anything for Florida in the SEC East, but it is probably a pretty good ad for that program. This is a little old now, but we just haven't mentioned it yet. Another defensive back, formerly at Auburn, Kamal Haddon, has landed at Tennessee. Tennessee's got room for any transfer it wants to take. They can just keep taking them all summer long. And so another guy with at least some SEC experience, Kamal Haddon, on his way to Tennessee, leaving Auburn. All of these intra-conference transfers, including the one I just mentioned, Brandon Turnage, to Georgia a moment ago, would seem to lead you to believe that the SEC schools themselves do not believe the league's prohibition on immediate eligibility for intra-conference transfers is going to stand. The SEC hasn't officially changed that rule yet, but most of the SEC seems to be operating on the assumption that that rule is on its way out the door there. And then finally there's this, and boy, you're just talking about rolling your eyes. So Jaden Blue is a very good running back, 4-star running back, one of the top, players in the country for the class of 2022. He's like a top 100 overall recruit type guy here. But he is not going to play his senior year. He's 4-star running back out of Houston, Texas. He is not going to play his senior year. He says, it's been a very difficult decision for my family and I. Football is a brutal sport. The wear and tear associated with the running back position is undeniable. I plan on taking this time to focus on my academics while enhancing my off the field, rehab, and reg. And he says this is a strategic and conscious effort to ensure that I am prepared to perform at an elite level at the collegiate rankings in the 22 season. This is an incremental step in hopes of one day fulfilling my NFL dream. So he's a Texas commit, but he's not going to play high school football in the state of Texas for his senior year because he wants to avoid the rigor of football while he prepares for his future there. I don't mind having to tell you, I just think this is just the most ludicrous thing I've ever heard. You are not going to get better at football by not playing it. And yeah, I know football is a tough sport, whatever else. But this idea that somehow this is going to be, like the missing piece that, gives him a leg up when he goes into college or whatever else. I just don't think that's true whatsoever. And listen, I got respect for injuries and I got respect for, all that kind of stuff. And I understand that players want to do everything they can to avoid that. But this isn't Jamar Chase sitting out his final year at college after he won the Biletnikoff Award the year before that for a national championship game against LSU. This is a young man who's only finished his junior year of high school. And frankly, I think that Steve Sarkisian's got an obligation here as his future college coach. I think if you're Sarkisian, you've got an obligation to step in and convince him not to do this. First of all, if I'm a Texas high school coach, I am absolutely watching Sarkisian on this to see how he handles this. The idea that all of a sudden now college programs might start trying to park high-level high school talent and kind of keep them safe and protected and wrap them in bubble wrap. They don't play their high school season. No, I've got no interest in that whatsoever. This, certainly a very strange story, but it's out there. Four-star running back not looking to play his senior year of high school, at least for right now. We'll see if cooler heads prevail. We'll make that your SEC through. And really quickly, let me also give a shout-out to a couple of UGA teams here. Georgia did get one win against Ole Miss over the weekend, setting itself up for an SEC tournament, which is really kind of a do-or-die situation. They need at least one win in the SEC tournament. They may need two to increase their chances of making the NCAA tournament as a regional team after that. So let's show you this on the screen here. Georgia getting ready to take on that's actually the softball team, the baseball team getting ready to take on LSU in the SEC tournament. That is upcoming. Yeah, so they'll do that Tuesday on the SEC network, needing that win against LSU to be able to get that done. And then maybe at least one more after that, although maybe just the win against LSU might be enough. And, of course, the softball team, they do get going this weekend. Super regional action after advancing out of their regional. And how big is this going to be against number 4 Florida? That's a daunting task, of course. But around here, we love watching Georgia teams beat up on those lousy, stinking Gators. So you better believe we're going to be rooting for the Georgia softball team to be able to do that this weekend. Super regional action in Gainesville against the Florida Gators. That's going to be a fun thing to be able to see. And, of course, speaking of the Florida Gators, let's get ready to wrap up today with our Gator Hater Roll Call the way that we do. We love awarding a golden shoe winner for those that show off their Gator hating credentials. And obviously we'd love to award one of these to the softball team here later on this weekend as they knock around Florida, hopefully in softball. But for today, let's award today's winner here. A very funny look at this from DawgNation 17 on Twitter, who kind of gives you a spelling bee meme here. It says your word is circus, and the speller spells it Gators. Yeah, Florida, a little bit of a circus from time to time. That seems to be the case, and unfortunately it's the kind of circus where many of us are not very entertained. But very funny nonetheless, and very golden shoe worthy today. DawgNation 17, congratulations on that. How about Gator Hater Countdown for the football team? 159 days from now. Getting some revenge against those lousy, stinking Gators and Jacksonville. Can't wait for that. We'll see you tomorrow at DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. And on video, time now for our R.S. Andrews cool down. Of course, R.S. Andrews, the one to trust for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. And really this time of year, let me just stop at air conditioning and saying that it's going to be 90-something degrees a lot this week. So if you're worried that your system's not tuned up, factory fresh specs, ready to go, get the peace of mind that you need to know that you can stay cool and comfortable in the hot summer that's on its way. That's actually really here now and on its way after that. rsandrews.com. They'll take really good care of you on that. All right, I have YouTube pulled up here right now, so let me just start right there. YouTube comments for a little bit on our R.S. Andrews cool down. We're not going to go super long today, I will say that. DogFan3 says we have a stable of running backs that can run all over the field. Yeah, I can't wait to see that. I know some of you had kind of shared with me the really cool picture of James Cook working out with his brother Dalvin Cook. Dalvin obviously looking great. Looks like he's in great shape. He also looked huge. We've had a lot of these photos lately where it's like one person looks abnormally large compared to the others. You had the weird photo the other day with the Bidens and Jimmy Carter and his wife, where it just seemed like the Bidens were like towering over the Carters. There was like a weird photo thing that created that. I think there was also a little bit of that with the Dalvin Cook, James Cook thing, where like Dalvin, who is in kind of the foreground of the photo, James kind of in the background, so it made Dalvin Cook look even bigger compared to James. I think that was kind of an optical illusion, but nonetheless, great to see them working out together. Oh yeah, please let's not get into that too much. Short par 3, no big deal there. Nothing. No big deal there. That's not quite the same level of performance that what Phil Mickelson had going for him either. Great to see William Perry in our YouTube comment section today. Also part of our our DawgNation Days of Summer event on Friday. That was a really cool thing. William, I was glad that you were there, and glad to have you with us here today there as well. Enrique Murillo said he saw the pictures of us at the Braves game. How was the atmosphere for the event? Great time. The DawgNation folks, so much fun to hang out with. And the Braves game itself was a ton of fun there as well. Just a great vibe around Truist Park there on Friday. Let's see what else. Off here on the YouTube side of things. Jay Shipe says rare YouTube start. That's not true, Jay. We start on YouTube every other day. At least we certainly try to. Memphis Dog says clown would be spelled Mullen. Yeah, that's about right there. I would agree with that. John Adams says, does June 1st signal coaches can also go visit away from campus? I believe it does. I need to check on that for sure because honestly I'm not usually a big stickler for the rules. But I do believe that's the case. At least there's some sort of form of traveling for camps and things like that that's available. John Hendricks, I agree with you completely. Good stuff there. John Hendricks says that he has all kinds of concerns about the team. He says, we obviously haven't won a national title in over 40 years. Secondary should be a concern. Offensive line, but both can end up being a positive. Yeah, I mean, listen, Georgia, like everybody else, is not a perfect team coming to the upcoming season. There's some real concerns. But there's obviously not anything about this team, whether it be inexperience at cornerback or whatever's happening to the offensive line. There's not anything with this team that's so broken that it can't be fixed. It's just a matter of, one of these teams that we talk about a lot, the Georgias, the Clemsons, the Alabamas, the Ohio States, Texas A&M. One of these teams is going to have it fall into place for them. And, the question a lot of Georgia fans would ask is, why not Georgia? And so obviously that's what we hope the answer is. Bango Lancer bringing up Deion Bowie taking a visit to Texas A&M later on this summer. Obviously, Nick Williams, who's from Bainbridge, now works for Texas A&M. Bango says have not heard much about him recently, and as I mentioned, Williams played a strong role as recruitment for the Dogs. Yeah, we'll see about that. I mean, ultimately, I'm assuming the ties for Bowie and Georgia go beyond just the hometown connection with Nick Williams there, but. Jeff Sentell wrote about it and then talked about it on our show a couple of weeks ago that Nick Williams going to A&M was a little bit of a coup for the Aggies. To bring in an analyst from one side to the other. I'm sure they paid him very well to do that. And, I mean, his impact to Texas A&M is probably going to be felt. Ultimately, if I had to guess, I don't think that's going to be enough to flip a Bowie away from a Georgia to a Texas A&M, but it's certainly something that you'll pay attention to because, as you said before, Williams was instrumental in Bowie's recruitment, and they do have a little bit of a deep tie there. All right, let's see what else. Blake Durden says Texas needs to retract his scholarship. This is the last thing that needs to happen. Yeah, I mean, look, I'm a golf fan, and around the PGA Tour sometimes it seems like there are a lot of golfers who don't like to play golf very much. Most of us love to play golf anytime we can, but there's a lot of professional golfers who don't like to do it because, they'll sit out tournaments, they'll have injuries, and I use air quotes around that. They have all these reasons why they don't want to play golf because – sometimes if you're not quite trusting your swing, the golf course can be a pretty lonely place. It can be a little scary sometimes to get out there and test yourself against the PGA Tour. You might, be left to kind of find out that, you're just not quite what you want to be right now. It seems like a lot of golfers I'm talking about professional golfers. It seems like a lot of professional golfers spend a lot of time trying to avoid playing golf, for psychological, mental reasons. And I think it'd be very easy to do the same thing with football there as well. I'm going to make a business decision. I'm going to, protect my body, as if anything in life is a sure thing. Not only are you not a sure thing to make the NFL, you're not even a sure thing to have success in college. I mean, the number of top 100 level 4-star running backs who've never had a significant moment happen for them at all on a college field, that list is as long as my arm, if not longer. So this is just bad advice. If you want to play football, you need to play football. And, if football's too physically demanding, if there's too much risk of injury, then you might want to try something else. You might want to do something else. But I'm just here to tell you that if you try to calculate your future and control your outcomes and say, I actually don't need to play football right now, I'm going to do this sometime in the future. I'm just telling you right now, his chances of actually being a good football player, I think, have gone down considerably. And listen, he's facing decisions that someone like me never faced. I obviously wasn't that level of athlete. My children likely won't be that level of athlete either. I totally get that his considerations are different. But, one of the worst mistakes anyone can make in any walk of life is this idea that I want to control outcomes and I'm going to avoid, playing my senior year because I don't need to, as if you know what the future holds there. I mean, while he's sitting around, training his body and working on his academics, other people are going to be out there grinding in football, getting better at football, and in all likelihood, they'll just kind of push him out of the way once they get, into college football and, surpass anything that this young man's probably going to do. And it's not a surprise to me. This is taking place, in the state of Texas, connected to the University of Texas. For whatever reason, Texas seems to be a little bit of a drama farm, and this is just kind of the latest example of that. Phil Rogers says it starts up front in terms of the need for improvement. He says that Coach Luke needs to earn that money this summer. I certainly understand that. A lot of you have kind of, made that point pretty clear that you're looking to see a bigger year from Matt Luke, better year for the Georgia offensive line. And obviously that group getting stronger, growing close together is certainly a big part of all that. Keith Fold says, I wonder how that Texas recruit's high school teammates feel about that decision to forego a senior season. Yeah, I can promise you they hate it. I can promise you they probably feel betrayed, as coaches probably do there as well. And that's not to say the player should play, for his high school coaches, but, it's just getting hard. And, there are a lot of high school coaches that, they've devoted their life to this sport, and the sport just gets harder. It just gets harder. Whether it be you think transfers are bad in college, wait till you see all the transfers that happen in high school all the time. And sometimes it's transferring for a good reason. I won't act like it's not, but not all the time. And that's tough on these coaches. And the pressure to win is immense. And, it's one thing to have a ton of pressure on you to win when you're making several $1 million a year. But, for a lot of these high school guys, they're making good salaries, don't get me wrong. But it's not life-changing money. They need that money to pay their mortgage and to survive. And, they have huge pressure to win right now. Roster turnover. You never know, what's going to happen. Now you got guys just choosing to opt out and sit out and not play. Listen, I don't care how good of an athlete you are. If you're not playing football, then you're not a football player. Now, you may try to go back and be a football player again, but if you spend time not playing football, then you're essentially not a football player. You're an athlete, but not currently choosing to use that athleticism to play football. All right, let's see what else. Isaac Cruz agrees about the Matt Luke situation, saying that offensive line needs to become a well-oiled machine. Yeah, it's a big offseason for them, for sure. For sure. Let's see what else. By the way, I hope y'all. I should have brought. I forgot to bring this in today. But Clarence Dawson on Friday gave me from our buddy Tennille Calvino one of the Facebook top fan hats. I meant to bring that with me today, and I didn't do it. I left it at home. But I was able to wear. Go back and see Friday's show. We did a show Friday night on video. If you tune into that, you'll see me wearing my Braves jersey, but you'll also see me wearing the DawgNation top fan hat there as well. Kevin Mills says, does UGA need to put up multiple 50-point games for college football playoff consideration if we don't win the SEC? Yeah, I mean, listen, I do think that right now we have a situation where the college football playoff is determined by human opinion, and human opinion can be swayed. People are not robots. And so, this is the Texas A&M portion of the show. You go back and look at Texas A&M a year ago, one-loss team. They got very little playoff consideration whatsoever. And some people would say, well, it's just because they got beat by Alabama. But I would also suggest the fact that Texas A&M was not scoring a ton of points a year ago. A&M liked to run the football last year. Isaiah Spiller, a big offensive line. They were content to win games sometimes easily without being all that pretty by how they were doing it. And I'd say that works against you in the eyes of the college football playoff selection committee. They would never come out and say, hey, we want to see the prettiest offenses. But that is what sways people's opinion. People have a tendency to think more prolific offensive teams are just better. Look at all the ways in which Oklahoma's gotten the benefit of the doubt over the years. Bad defense, good offense, and yet somehow a lot of people have convinced themselves that's the recipe for a great team. So if Georgia were to, have a loss either to Clemson or an Alabama in the SEC championship game and be left to, cross its fingers hoping that it's going to make the college football playoff, little easier to think they might get that nod if they've scored a lot of points. You mentioned, 50 points in, several games or, averaging 40-something points for the season. I would say it's a little easier to get that nod at that point in time. All right, a few more comments here. Joe Moody says offense sells tickets and nowadays wins championships too. Yeah, it's kind of funny how that's changed. I guess I've got golf on the brain after the PGA Championship for the weekend. But it used to be you drive for show and you putt for dough, and then all of a sudden people realize no, you actually also drive for dough there as well. That the guys who hit the ball longest are going to do most of the winning. College football is kind of the same way. It used to be offense sells tickets, defense wins championships, but lately it's that offensive firepower that's also led to those championships as well. I think you're absolutely right about that. Keith Fold sounds like he had a nice camping trip. Glad you enjoyed that, Keith. Happy to hear that. Bill Sanders says Irk Russell always said if the other team never scores, we will never lose. And I think that was a great thing for the Irk Russell era. Unfortunately, there are a lot of rules today that just sort of make that a lot harder to do. It's just harder to keep offenses down for a full game. Randy Hall says, by the end of the week, you're SEC West champion. So I'm probably going to, not that I'm going to be self-serving here, and I'm going to be intentionally obnoxious about this, but I've got a vacation week coming up like mid-June. I will make my official predictions probably then. And I realize that y'all don't really care. I'm not taking myself too seriously. But I'll do some vacation week shows that week sometime around June. We'll also be off on Memorial Day coming up on Monday, but vacation week later on in the month of June. And I'll do my official predictions then. Christopher White says, I say dogs win it all. And he says, I'm walking to the ring, arms swaying like Vince McMahon. I like the idea of that. I like for sure that. Daniel Calvino talking to Philip Jordan Wells says, let's get that Auburn fishing team to help out. Yeah, the Auburn fishing team, as we told you last week, I guess back off their suspension. According to Bassmaster, they're winning tournaments again. All right, we're going to leave here in just a minute. Calvin Sanders says, how long before Arkansas upsets Bama? I think within the next 3 years. Listen, I like what Sam Pittman's doing over there. I do. Steve Highland says, congratulations to the Lady Dogs softball. That's right. They advance to the Super Regional. Going to be, that's a lot of fun. A lot of fun. Jermaine King says, I'll be taking my talents to South Beach. No, I'm not quite so South Beachish, probably. That's not probably where I'll be. A couple more on YouTube. We'll get ready to go. Nature Gator says, Florida does not have a horse sport. I'm actually a little bit surprised at that. Actually, a little bit surprised. I guess they couldn't find enough horses in the transfer portal to field a team. J. Ricks 2510 says, the Florida disdain runs deep, but Auburn is the rival here in West Georgia. Dog days at Callaway again this year. Boy, I'd love to be back at Callaway Gardens again soon, and you're 100% right about that, J. Ricks. Those folks over there in that part of the world, that Carrollton area, They hate Auburn. That's one thing you got to know for sure. Columbus, Carrollton, that whole like West Georgia region. That is Auburn hating territory right there because there are a lot of Auburn fans that live over there too. Very true. Jordan Bowman says Clemson softball's only played one full season, has already won the ACC regular season, made the tourney. I say with all due respect, that may tell me more about the ACC than it tells me about Clemson. But congratulations nonetheless. A couple of y'all caught my joke a moment ago. I'm glad to know that you picked up on that. Memphis Dog and Enrique Murillo did. Ooh, Scott Harris, even better joke. I'm not going to read it out loud, but I wish I would have thought of that, Scott. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. All right, anything else before we go? Appreciate Casey Lay, Eddie Burleson, me and Vince Yarbrough checking in, John William Adams, a lot of folks checking in over here on the Facebook side. All right, we're getting ready to go. Hey, thank all of you for being here. By the way, make sure you check out the Atlanta Journal-Constitution online at ajc.com. As I said before, big night last night for the Hawks. Trae Young, kind of a national coming-out party with his game winner against the New York Knicks. Of course, it was a nice weekend for the Atlanta Braves there as well. And plenty more on, what happened with Phil at Kiowa Island. One of the most amazing, sporting moments I've seen. Certainly as amazing a weekend watching golf as you could ever have. Great stuff. And as I told you before, Austin Riley, red hot as of late for the Braves. That's great to see. Also, I guess an attempt by Buckhead to kind of form its own city. You see this sometimes happen from time to time. That seems to be in the works right now. We'll see if that gets off the ground at all. And, of course, how the labor shortage is impacting like restaurants and things like that in the Atlanta area. So all of that going on right now. So make sure you check that out. AJC.com for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Thanks for being here. By the way, did y'all see, I'm watching one of the TVs in front of me has the FS1 thing. Did y'all see Julio Jones like walking around with the Dallas Cowboys sweatshirt on? And I think Adam Schefter's the one that shared this on Twitter. Boy, can you imagine something like that happening in college football? It'd be crazy. Sometimes Julio, man, I don't know. I mean, I think that he can arguably be called the greatest Falcon of all time. But, man, how are you going to walk around in a Dallas Cowboys sweatshirt? Some of the things sometimes, I just don't know about that. All right, nonetheless, that's a different conversation for a different day. Appreciate you being here. rsandrews.com for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They'll show up on time, and they'll do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. They'll get your air conditioning unit tuned back up to factory fresh specs. And this time of year, that really matters. Hey, y'all have a great day. See you back here tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We'll look forward to talking to you then.